One of the most challenging aspects of HDR photography is ghosting. If a subject moves in between different frames of your bracketed shots, the way it's processed could be pretty unpredictable, but you'll probably see a kind of a half image, something that looks like a ghost. It's really easy to remove though, so let's learn how to do that. You can see I have 3 separate shots of the Boston skyline here, and the sky here just looks fantastic. But if we zoom in, we'll see that the buildings are just completely black. In this overexposed shot, the buildings look great. You can see all the detail, but the sky is just completely white. This isn't how my eyes saw it. My eyes have a better dynamic range than the camera. So the first step in the process is to identify which of the pictures we're going to blend. Now, the histogram is going to be important here because as I'm looking at this picture, I love the way the sky looks to my eye, but I'm looking at the histogram and I can see it's pretty underexposed. This whole section here where most of the information should be is completely empty. So while I like the way the sky looks better here, I'm actually going to use this image for the sky because if you look at the histogram here, you can see there's lots of information in that right quarter, which means all the yellows and oranges over here are properly exposed. It's about 2 stops brighter than this shot, which means it's going to have far less noise. Because I'm going to be blending these 2 photos, I can edit them just for the parts of the picture that I'm going to use. So I'll start doing that in Lightroom just because Lightroom's easier for this type of thing. So here I only care about the buildings. So I'm going to zoom right into the buildings and make them look good. Let's raise those blacks up and give it a little more contrast. Pull the brightness down a little bit. I'll pull the white balance a little more towards blue to give it a little more natural color. Adjust the exposure down a little bit, and that looks good to my eye. Now let's adjust this photo for the sky. Now remember, it looked nicer with a little bit darker exposure, so I'm going to bring that down so that we can see these streaks in the sky. Alright, that's a pretty good looking sky. You can see I have a lot of sensor dust here, so I'll just clean this up real quick. Alright, that's a nice looking sky. Now I'll go back to library mode, select these 2 photos, and add them as layers in Photoshop. You can see in the layers panel here that it's stacked both the images on top of each other. Now I'm just going to use a layer mask on the top layer to delete everything that I don't want from that image. So I like the water better from the first image too. So I click the layer mask button down here to create a completely white layer mask. And if you know a little bit about Photoshop, you'll remember that the layer mask is white where the picture shows up, and we're going to paint it black wherever we don't want the picture to show up. So just to demonstrate that, I'll pull out a brush and make it black and just paint across the sky here. And we can see here that this is making the underlying sky show up. But of course we can be more precise than that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the quick selection tool. And I'm just going to select all of the sky here. This does a pretty good job of just avoiding the buildings here, and I don't have to be perfect about it because I'll go back and refine it later. And I'll go ahead and select the water while I'm at it. So now I've selected the sky, but what I actually want to select here is the buildings. So I'm going to press Ctrl-Shift-I to invert my selection, and then I'm going to use the Refine Edge tool to perfect my selection. So I'm going to output to a new layer with a layer mask. And there we go, we have that beautiful sky with the buildings that I like. Now it doesn't look completely natural because I'm blending 2 images with different exposures, but what I can do now is tweak it a little bit to look a little more natural. So I'll press Ctrl-L to open up the Levels tool, and this is probably the most useful tool that I can do. What's going to help me here is to bring the exposures a little bit closer together, basically by darkening that image. Now as I zoom in, you'll notice that some parts of it don't look that great, like the transition to the water here. So I'm going to go in and edit the layer mask. I'm selecting the layer mask here, and then I will select a black brush, and I'll just paint in the layer mask to erase these rough edges. My brush has a nice soft edge up here that will allow me to really just smoothly even it out. There you go. This looks a lot more natural. All right, close enough. Now I will save this and bring it back into Lightroom. And there's the finished product. You can see it's much better than either of the before images because it's a combination of the best parts of both. Here's another bracketed shot that I took in Copenhagen. You can see, if you look at this picture, everything looks kind of drab. You've got these dramatic skies up here, but the buildings don't look particularly bright. So what I'd like to do is to brighten up the buildings and actually darken the sky a little bit. If you look at this HDR photo that I processed in Photomatix, it's the same bracketed shots, but look what happened to the flags here. Because there was motion in the flags, the HDR software made all this ghosting, which is kind of ugly. So instead, I'll just manually blend these two pictures. Once again, I'll select them, right-click them, select Edit In, and then select Open Layers in Photoshop. So you can see it put the brighter picture above the darker picture. If I hide the brighter picture, you can see the sky looks much better there. It looks like they're not completely lined up, so I'm going to select both layers, go to the Edit menu, and then select Auto Align Layers. So if I hide that layer, you can see they're now perfectly aligned. So all I need to do is select the sky here and then delete it. So once again, I'll use my Quick Selection tool, and I'll select the sky. Then a little Refine Edge always works wonders. Select Menu and then Refine Edge. Now I'll create a layer mask based on that selection. Now I'll invert that selection since I actually want to use the buildings from the shot and not the sky. That's the Select menu and then Inverse, which is the same as Control-Shift-I. Now I'll just create a layer mask based on that selection. There we go. We have the sky from the shot where the sky looked great and the buildings from the other shot. Looking at it now, I can see I missed a couple of spots, like this spot here, in between the flag, like this spot here. All I have to do is select the layer mask and paint any areas that I want to shine through black. So I'll just select that with my magic wand tool and then paint in that selection black. You can see I have the layer mask here selected in the layers panel, so anything I paint in black here is going to shine right through. And it's not a perfect shot because the whole flagpole actually moved, but I think that's going to be subtle enough that it won't be noticeable when you're viewing the full picture. I can also use this opportunity to adjust the two layers independently. So I might want a little more drama out of the sky. So I've got the background layer with the sky selected in it here, and then I'll just press Control L, and then what I can do is drop the whites and lower the midpoint some. There we go. Now that's a nice dramatic sky. Get a little blacks in there. That's more like the way my eye remembers it. So here are my two before shots, and then here's my after shot. You can see it's much better than either of the before shots. And in fact, it's much more true to what I saw that day. I like to apply those techniques anytime I have ghosting or water or really any moving subject in an HDR photo.